You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than the whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members and that your whole body, than that your whole body go into hell." So as you can imagine, this is a really interesting portion of the text to be in right now, especially with the internet on fire with this very topic of adultery right now. I was listening earlier, there's a comedian that I like to listen to when I'm scrolling. This guy, he's kind of like the king of dad jokes. And he was talking about, ultimately in life, how many problems do we really have? And some of you might have heard of Michael Collins. He's actually from Colombia. And I've gotten to interact with him a little bit because of what I do for an organization called Logos. And he tells this joke to where he says, for most of us, if you think about it, you only have two problems. And those two problems ultimately, please forgive me if I don't tell this well, because normally it has me rolling on the floor. But he says, ultimately, these two problems are this. One, when you get up in the morning, you ultimately want to know, am I going to be okay? He said, if you're going to be okay today, then you ain't got no problem. But if you're not going to be okay, you only have two problems. Then we start thinking about our health. All right, am I well, or am I going to get sick? Well, if you're well, you ain't got no problems. But if you get sick, you only got two problems. Am I going to get better, or am I going to get worse? If I get better, I ain't got no problems. But if I get sick, I got two problems. Am I going to live, or am I going to die? If I live, I ain't got no problems. But if I die, I only got two problems. Am I going to go to heaven, or am I going to go to hell? If I go to heaven, I ain't got no problems. But if I go to hell, I only got two problems. Original or extra crispy? I'm just kidding. I tell that because in and of ourselves, when it comes to our sin nature, we like to overcomplicate what typically is something that is very simple in regards to our sin nature. You see, we live in a time that prizes image over integrity, comfort over conviction. But in this passage, Jesus isn't addressing them, and today he's not addressing us as a PR consultant because we have an image problem. He speaks to us as the shepherd of our souls. In this text, he bypasses the external and pierces the heart. And what we find here is not a moral upgrade, it is a confrontation with the root of sin. If we think contextually of who Jesus is talking to, when this text, or this particular portion of text starts off where he says, "You have heard it said," he's talking about the law. The Jewish hearers of this time, oh, of course, we know exactly what you're talking about. It would not have been something foreign of, well, where's he going with this? They were very familiar with the law. But the problem was they were familiar with the law from the standpoint of these are just the things that I should be doing, not getting to the heart of the matter, which is indeed the heart. Jesus, he's not speaking in vague generalities. He's actually identifying spiritual cancer that must be treated at the level of desire, imagination, and the will. And he offers us more than just a warning. He actually gives us a way forward rooted in the transforming power of the gospel. So today we have 3 points. The first point is the law fulfilled and internalized. Once again, where Jesus has said, "You have heard that it was said, but I say to you," Jesus is not replacing the law. He's actually fulfilling it. Matthew 5:17, he actually says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." The Mosaic commandment against adultery in Exodus chapter 20, verse 14, "You shall not commit adultery." This was never only about protecting marriage. It wasn't only about that. It was about upholding the holiness of God and the covenant fidelity that reflects his nature. The prophet Hosea says in chapter 2, 19 through 20, "And I will betroth to you me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in steadfast love and in mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord." You see, by extending the reach of this law to the heart, Jesus echoes the prophets who proclaim that God desires truth in the inward being, not just our outward actions. My grandma used to say to me, "I don't want you to just know to do right. I want you to actually do right. And in order for you to actually want to do right, we have to get to the heart of the matter." And that's typically when bad news was coming my way, because discipline was following normally. But in Psalms 51:6, "Behold, you delight in truth in the inward being, and you teach me wisdom in the secret heart." You see, this is a work of the Spirit. This is a work that we can delight in. We should not want to just obey out of fear, or obey because it's the right thing to do, or obey just because I don't want any trouble. We should want to obey because we delight in God. And we can pray and we can ask for this. It's not something that if I close my heart and I clench my fist tight enough that I can conjure up. This is something that Jesus, that he wants to give to you. I have to try not to get ahead of myself because I'm about to jump here into progressive salvation, or sanctification. Sanctification. You see, it's not just our hands that can betray the covenant. It's our gaze and our imagination and our affections. See, this is where Jesus really caught them up. Because they're like, well, I totally understand what adultery is. I'm not guilty of that. No, not me. Maybe that fella, or maybe them over there. But me, I'm an upstanding citizen. And you can check my credentials and check my pedigree. You won't find that sin there. But Jesus says, what about your gaze? What about what is happening that those around you can't see? The issue isn't just what your hands have done, it is what your heart has loved. It is what your heart has loved. There are things in our lives that at the end of the day, if we are honest with ourselves, we can say, I loved that today more than I loved Jesus. The actions of my hand were just the outward manifestation of where my heart was. Lust is not merely, as our society maybe wants to downplay it, to be simply misdirected attraction. It is covenant breaking at the level of desire. It is treating people as objects, not image bearers. It turns sacred intimacy into selfish indulgence. These things do not reflect how God created us. They do not reflect Him. I love how Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones defines lust. He says, it means an inordinate affection or desire. Lust means the abuse of something which is naturally and perfectly right and legitimate in and of itself. There's a perversion that has to take place. And it is not limited simply to sexuality. There's a lust for power, which distorts servant leadership. There's the lust for praise, which can turn ministry into performance. There's the lust for emotional intimacy outside of covenant, and this will seed destruction in homes and churches alike, or in neighborhoods. We can see how sin, when it's given fertile soil to grow in, can manifest itself. Oftentimes, we like to bring up David's sin as the classic example of adultery. In 2 Samuel 11, it says, in the spring of the year, the time when kings go to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. And David remained at Jerusalem. It happened one late afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman. And one said, is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Now I'm going to stop there real quick, because that particular portion of this narrative always catches me. Here you have the king, and I'm pretty sure that he's not just, talking to one guy. And it says, and one said, so this guy was probably like, I don't know if he was like standing in the back, and he didn't want David to know that he was the one that pointed out what everybody clearly knew. Isn't that some other cat's wife? I could just see that in the courtroom, to where David's giving out this edict, and somebody just says, isn't that Uriah's wife? And the place just goes silent. And here's the thing. This was an instance where David could have chosen to reflect the heart of God. Actually, it started back when he was on the roof. Oh, I probably shouldn't have seen that, and went back in. But sin only needs a little bit of fertilizer. It only needs a little bit of leaven. Because he took a gaze, and then his imagination started to play out, how could I get away with this? Then he starts to bring others into it. And then it also says, now she had been purifying herself from uncleanness. She was actually in process of preparing herself to be able to go in for worship, because she was ceremonial unclean, as it was that particular time for her to go through her cycle. So she wasn't parading on a beach wearing an inappropriate outfit. You see, the great biblical warning here is not just because of what he did, but of how it started. A lingering gaze, an unguarded heart, and the refusal to kill sin in its infancy. Kill it while it's manageable. How often do we see something that's going on in our own lives and we don't address it? I know I've been guilty of that. And then next thing you know, we're so afraid because we've let it turn into this big uncontrollable monster that needs to be dealt with. And there's repercussions and consequences that, although we can run to Jesus and receive forgiveness and pardon for sin, there's still the repercussions of what have taken place. David went from a lustful gaze to exercising power and control and taking to murder. Theologian Robert Bergen, he said, the writer's omission of an explicit motive behind Bathsheba's action reinforces the conviction that this story is not so much about Bathsheba's actions, but David's. In our society, we really want to pass the buck. Well, if they had not, then I would not have. This is about you. This is about me and my God, you and your God. In Psalm 51, we see a psalm of David when Nathan the prophet went to him after he had gone into Bathsheba. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love, according to your abundant mercy, blot out my transgressions, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against you and only you have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you may be justified in your words and blameless in your judgment. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Behold, you delight in the truth, in the inward being, and you teach me wisdom in the secret heart. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones that you have broken rejoice. Hide your face from my sins, and blot out all my iniquities, and create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. His confession should be ours too. His confession should be ours too. You see, when we own up to it and we run to God, I actually like how Tim Keller, I believe it was, said that when we're in trouble, our reaction should not be, please don't tell my dad. I don't want to get in trouble. We should have the response of, I need to go tell my dad. I'm in trouble. But blame shifting is the weapon of choice for the unrepentant. You see, there's no true mourning for sin until the eye has seen Christ. It is a beautiful remark of an old divine, actually I like how Charles Spurgeon says, that eyes are made for two things at least. First, to look with, next, to weep with. The eye which looks to the pierced one is the eye which weeps for him. Our heart, as Jeremiah says, the heart is deceitfully wicked above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? Ezekiel says we must understand that true obedience begins not with behavior modification, but with renovation. Actually, Ezekiel 36, I believe, helps to spell this out for us. But it says that behavior, not with behavior modification, but with heart renovation. And the gospel doesn't merely redirect our hands, it rewires our hearts. Point number 2, the eye is gateway. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out. That used to confuse me as a kid and sounded extremely painful because I can't even touch my eye to put in a contact. So what do we do with this? You see, Jesus now presses into how sin is sustained through what we look at, dwell on, and feed our desires with. Our eye represents the intake of the soul. So what we fixate on eventually forms us. Warren Wiersbe, he says, the eyes see what the heart loves. If the heart loves God and is single in this devotion, then the eyes will see God where others don't see him. Proverbs It says, let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you. Ponder the path of your feet. Then all your ways will be sure. Do not swerve to the left, to the right or to the left. Turn your foot away from evil. See, cutting out or the tearing of the right eye, this is hyperbole with holy intent. Christ is not advocating for physical harm and mutilation, but decisive and urgent action. He's calling for mortification. This word we get from Colossians 3:5, to where it says, put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. This means to put sin to death. Quit trying to manage it. Don't try to manage it. Ask God to put it to death in us. You see, the fight against lust is not passive. Jesus calls us to spiritual amputation. Not because he is cruel, but because he is good. Better to lose something precious than to be mastered by something deadly. We are discipled by our devices, our feeds, our playlist. And Jesus is asking, what are you gazing at that is forming your desires? We must recover the discipline of guarding the eye gate with the same seriousness as guarding our homes. I don't know about y'all. I don't go to bed and say, oh, my door looks kind of open. It's all good. And just go to bed. I can't. I don't know if it's like some kind of nervous quirk or something, but I have to like go and repeatedly touch locks and like, did I really lock that? Sometimes I'll lay down in bed. Oh, I don't think I locked the basement door. Then I'll get all the way up and go down. Oh, I locked it. It's totally locked. Then I come up there like, well, maybe I should lock this door. I am all about locking stuff up and making sure that people and things that should not get in don't get in. If I can take that same seriousness and weight and fixate it to my eyes, my ears, not because I want to practice some outward form of legalism to prove to you that I'm good and that I'm holy, but I care about where my affections lie. And as C.S. Lewis said, we are far too easily satisfied. If your right hand causes you to sin, Jesus says, cut it off. The hand represents action, habitual, practiced behavior. Jesus is showing us that unrepentant sin must not only be exposed, it must be uprooted. In Romans 6, it says, what shall we say then? Are we to continue in sin that grace may abound? By no means. How can we who died to sin still live in it? Do you not know that all of us who have been baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death, and that we were buried, therefore, with him by baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in the newness of life. For if we have been united with him in death like his, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. My favorite part, we know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. For one who has died has been set free from sin. Now, if we have died with Christ, we believe we will also live with him. We know that Christ, being raised from the dead, will never die. So again, death no longer has dominion over him. For the death he died to sin once and for all, reminds us that we have been freed from sin to become slaves to righteousness. And having been set free from sin, having become slaves to righteousness, guys, grace empowers us for war against sin, not passivity. One of my favorite quotes is, where Harriet Tubman says when they talked to her about how many slaves that she had helped free, and she said, I would have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves. It's one of the greatest deceptions of sin and lust and idolatry is to convince you, nope, nothing to see here. No cruel master, no cruel taskmaster here. Continue and proceed as usual. And oftentimes as believers, we're free. We are free indeed. But the renewal of our mind, sometimes we still behave like we're slaves to particular besetting sins. You're free, just not walking in it. See, this is where progressive sanctification meets daily decision making. The Christian life is not a series of one-time victories, but a daily dying to sin and rising with Christ. Think about that. Daily dying to sin. We've heard that a million times, but what about a daily rising with Christ? Oftentimes we go, I have to die to sin daily, full stop. And then we look kind of sour and I'm miserable because I'm dying to sin over here. How about rising now with Christ daily? That brings joy more than coffee in the morning. And I can say this because I'm not supposed to drink coffee. Some of you are out there like, Brent, that is a lie. But nonetheless, rise with Christ. There's a reason Paul tells Timothy to flee youthful lust. You don't negotiate with sin. You don't tame it. You crucify it. You see, in the Bible, Joseph faced a crucial test of fidelity when Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him. Rather than giving in to the temptation, he chose to flee, proclaiming, how can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? His commitment to his heart's fidelity, even in the face of temptation and possible persecution, exemplifies faithfulness. Joseph's story, or his narrative, teaches us that fidelity is not just about loyalty in relationships, but also about the integrity of our hearts towards God's will. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got as a young man, I know we got some young men out there, my dad used to say to me when it came to things that I shouldn't see, he said, Brent, it takes a real man to know when to run like a little girl. I'm not insulting little girls, but they're fast. But what he was saying is, don't depend on your own strength. Run, flee from sin. Our foe, Satan, is ancient and very wise, unfortunately. Flee, but when you flee, run to Jesus. That has a myriad of different ways that it could look and manifest itself. But flee, run from Jesus. Don't lean into your own sense of moral superiority because you don't have it. So the application here is, what habits in my life feed sin instead of starve it? What daily routines, devices, or relationships are keeping me from seeing the holiness of God? What spiritual disciplines, prayer, fasting, confession, accountability need to be reestablished or dug into? These do not produce our salvation, but they put us on a collision course of leaning into Christ, because then he becomes our focus. More than Facebook or TikTok or whatever your vice is. Lean into the things that are going to press us into Jesus. Holiness is not merely saying no to sin, it's saying yes to Christ. It is hands made clean for gospel work. Psalm 24, who shall ascend the hill of the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not lift up his soul to what is false and does not swear deceitfully. Can any of us say that we've done that? No, this is Jesus. We need to lean into him and his perfect record of righteousness. So in conclusion, radical grace is for radical holiness. The radical commands of Jesus in this text makes sense only in light of the radical grace of Jesus. He simply doesn't say cut it off to leave us bleeding. He says cut it off because he was cut off for us. Isaiah says, by oppression and judgment he was taken away, and as for his generation, who was considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people. He bore the wrath that we deserved. He carried the shame that we still hide. He rose so that we might walk in the newness of life. But once again in Romans it says, we were buried therefore with him by baptism into death, in order that, just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in the newness of life. This logic of grace, because we have been united to Christ, we can now walk in a manner worthy of him. Grace does not undermine our obedience, it fuels it. If you are not sure about all this and you have not placed your faith in Jesus, understand that your sin is great. Your sin is great. But Christ is greater. He will not only pardon your guilt, but he will give you a new heart. To the believer, you do not fight alone. The same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you. Sin is being put to death in you already, even though it doesn't feel like it yet sometimes as we battle daily, but truly it is. It is being put to death. So let's meditate on these scriptures. Psalm 51, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Romans 8:13, for if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. Philippians 2:13, for it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. God is working in all of us. Oftentimes people say, I'm waiting for revival. God's already active and busy in the business of revival. He is. And we can lean into that and take joy in that and celebrate in that. I'll pray.